Welcome back to Spring into Math Day. Today's lesson is going to be on the topic of scatter plots. This is the first topic in our statistical unit, so let's go ahead and dive right in. Scatter plots, a graph that shows the relationship between two data sets. The two sets of data are graphed as ordered pairs on a coordinate plane, which we refer to as a graph. There are different types of relationships that we can look for and different types of trends that can come from looking at a scatter plot. And today we're going to discuss that and look at those different types of trends that you can see. The first type of trend that we want to see on a scatter plot, or that have the potential to see, is one that in a business situation that all businesses want to see. This is called a positive linear relationship. The points lie close to a line. As x increases, your y value also increases. In terms of looking at a business, this means that you're being profitable for the year. Negative linear relationships. This would be the opposite of being profitable. This would mean that you're losing money in your business. And here we have a nice illustration that shows that our points are kind of going towards a downward slope. The points lie close to a line, just like they do on a positive relationship, but as x increases, our y value is decreasing. And that's really the big difference between positive and negative linear relationships on a scatter plot. We can also have what's called a nonlinear relationship when we're looking at a scatter plot. Here we have a graph that shows what looks like kind of like a bell curve, where our points don't really have any true shape or form. The points lie in the shape of a curve. So if we see a graph or a scatter plot that has points that are lying in this curved fashion, we should think to ourselves that this is a nonlinear relationship. We also have what's called a no relationship. The points on this graph show zero pattern. They don't have a positive flow or a negative flow, and they also don't look like a curve. So on this graph, they were showing colors in the rainbow versus shoe size, and those two things really don't correlate together in any aspect of life. So we consider this type of graph a non-relationship or a no relationship scatter plot. Here we have a data set. So it's the data for 10 students' history and zoography test scores at a high school, and they're provided on our chart. So we're going to look to plot all of these points on a graph and then decide what type of association we could find on the graph of our scatter plot. Remember, we have positive, negative, nonlinear, and a no relationship to choose from. So we're going to make ordered pairs here from our two different types of test scores. We have history and zoography. So if you would like, get out a piece of graph paper and go ahead and plot these coordinates on your graph, and we will see what kind of association or relationship we can find from these two types of data. Now on the next slide, I've already gone ahead and graphed these for you. So we can see here we have a graph. On the x-axis we have our history grade, and on the y-axis we have our zoography grades. And based on what we see in this graph, we can probably decide that after looking at the four types of relationships earlier in the video, we can probably see here that this has somewhat of a strong positive correlation. So when it asks you what type of trend do you see on a test or a quiz, it's asking you to decide positive, negative, no trend, or a nonlinear trend. So the line here shows that there is a positive slope. So we would say that this has a positive association. This would indicate that if you have a good grade or a high graded history, you also most likely have a good or high grade in your other class, in this case, zoography. There's a couple pieces of vocabulary that we shouldn't forget to discuss. There's this idea of an outlier, a clue much greater or less than the other in a set of data. So if we have a graph and all the lines are in a nice positive linear relationship, and then we have one set of data that's completely on its own and it's not anywhere near the other pieces of data, we would decide that that is what we call an outlier piece of data. Clusters is another good vocabulary word used to describe a scatter plot. It's a set of closely grouped data. This means that they could even be sitting on top of each other in terms of data points. And gaps, the amount of space between data. Sometimes when we graph sets of data, we find that there is a large amount of space in between them. And in this case, we refer to that as a gap. In review for discussing scatter plots have different types of trends. We can have positive trend, negative trend, a no trend, or a non-relationship trend, and last but not least, we can have a non-linear trend. Good luck figuring out what types of trends in your upcoming types of questions for scatter plots. Catch you next time.